Hello ladies and gentlemen, Tevaron here and welcome back to my first ever set review for Magic Duels. This time we will be going over the black cards of Kaladesh. And just as a reminder, these are my opinions and raw card evaluations, having never actually played Constructed with these cards. I have however played a bit of Limited with some of them now, and have a bit of insight from that. If you would like to check out the previous reviews, just click the annotations on the screen or the links in the description. Now, let's begin, shall we? Up first we have Ambitious Aetherborn. For a black and 4 generic, we get a 4/3 Aetherborn Artificer with Fabricate 1, and Fabricate is a new mechanic in the set. If you need a little bit of a reminder, when this creature enters the battlefield, you may put a +1/+1 counter on it, or create a 1/1 Colorless Servo artifact creature token. So I think this guy is too expensive for what he brings to the table. I think we can do a lot better than this in the 5-drop slot. Diabolic Tutor is 2 black and 2 generic for a sorcery that allows you to search your library for a card and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. So Diabolic Tutor has seen some small amount of play in the past. It was by no means a card that would go in every deck, nor do I think it will be now. Still, I do expect Diabolic Tutor to see some amount of play. How much will depend on a great many different factors. Die Young. For a black and a colorless, we have a sorcery. We choose target creature, get 2 energy counters, and then we may pay any amount of energy. The creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each energy paid this way. Before we evaluate this card, I feel it's important to once again explain how this effect sort of works with these removal spells. In the case of Die Young, where we are choosing any amount of energy to pay, and the creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each energy paid, the opponent must respond and do any creature pump or similar things before we choose how much energy to pay. The energy is only chosen upon spell resolution, and I really do hope Magic Duels gets this right. So for example, suppose we target a 2/2 creature with Die Young and we have 2 more energy sitting in our pool that we've not used yet. The opponent has the ability to pump this creature +1/+1 if they wish. If they want to do that, they need to do that before we choose how much energy to spend. If they don't choose to pump it +1/+1, then we only have to spend 2 energy to kill it. After we choose to spend that energy, it's too late to pump it. The creature is already dead. That all being said, this card is very mediocre. First off, it's a sorcery, and second off, it's much worse than its red counterpart, which we will see a bit later on, and also worse than Grasp of Darkness most of the time. Maybe there's a black energy deck that would prefer to have this and doesn't contain any red that will want to play this card, but I kind of doubt it. Eliminate the Competition is a black and 4 generic sorcery. As an additional cost to cast Eliminate the Competition, sacrifice X creatures, destroy X target creatures. Now, one important thing is that the sacking of creatures is an additional cost. So if this card gets counterspelled, you've just sacrificed all those creatures for nothing. And while Duels didn't get Voldaren Pariah and Eldritch Moon, this doesn't seem like a worthy replacement either. Maybe in a black deck that can generate a ton of servos or thopters? I mean, that's the only instance in which I can see this card being playable. Umbral Bruiser. For a black and a generic, we get a 3/1. Umbral Bruiser enters the battlefield tapped, and it has menace as long as you control an artifact. Here we have the first indication that there could be a black/X artifact aggro creature deck. I'm not sure what other color it would definitely be paired with, if any. It may just be mono black. A 2 mana for a 3/1 with menace is really good. Maybe white isn't the only game in town when it comes to artifact aggression, or maybe you just play black-white. Essence Extraction is a 2 black and 1 generic mana instant. Essence Extraction deals 3 damage to target creature, and you gain 3 life. So this card is very reminiscent of Lightning Helix. However, it can't damage the opponent and costs 1 more mana. Also, it's monocolored, so even though it does require double black, it's probably going to be easier to cast most of the time. And while at the same cost, Murder is a better removal spell, this gains you life. Control decks like gaining life, and they like killing creatures. And that's what this card does. Seems like a match made in heaven. Hell. Sign me up for this one. Foundry Screecher is 1 black and 2 generic for a 2/1 flying bat that gets +1/+0 as long as you control an artifact. So not nearly as good as the Bruiser, but it does fly. It may not be good enough to see play in the aggro artifact deck featuring black, but with the Duels card pool being much more limited than the Paper Magic one, I suspect this will probably still get the nod. Fretwork Colony. For a black and a colorless, we get a 1/1 insect creature that can't block, and at the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on Fretwork Colony, and you lose 1 life. This is another very strong aggro card. Played on turn 2, this gets ridiculous very fast. It's an awful draw later in the game, but any deck playing this card doesn't want the game to get to that point in any case, so I think it's a moot point. Live Fast is a sorcery for a black and 2 that allows you to draw 2 cards, lose 2 life, and gain 2 energy counters. In Duels, this doesn't have to compete for a slot with Painful Truths or Succumb to Temptation. However, since Origins isn't rotating out on Duels either, Read the Bones is still around, and in a deck that doesn't care about energy, then that will always get the nod over Live Fast. However, in a deck that does care about energy, I think Live Fast is definitely your card of choice. Marionette Master. For 2 black and 4 colorless, we get a 1/3 human artificer with Fabricate 3. It is important to note that for Fabricate, you can't choose to split what you do with them. Like for this card, for example, Fabricate 3, you can't choose to put 1/1/1 counter on the creature itself and then make 2 servos. You have to do all 3 one way or the other. Whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. This card seems very powerful. However, I don't think an aggressive build will want to play a 6-drop. And unfortunately, Cryptolith Rite isn't a thing on Magic Duels. Still, I can't help but think that there is probably a home for this lady somewhere. Servos and Thopters and Clues all want her to see play at their side. Hopefully, we can make that happen. Up next, we have Midnight Oil, a 2 black and 2 generic mana enchantment. Midnight Oil enters the battlefield with 7 hour counters on it. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card and remove 2 hour counters from Midnight Oil. Your maximum hand size is equal to the number of hour counters on Midnight Oil. Whenever you discard a card, you lose 1 life. Well, Harmless Offering isn't a thing in Duels. Yet, this still seems like a card a very aggressive deck would want to run. Suicide Black may even become a thing. Fretwork Colony certainly hopes so. Noxious Gearhulk. For 2 black and 4 generic, we get a 5/4 artifact creature construct with Menace. And when Noxious Gearhulk enters the battlefield, you may destroy another target creature. If a creature is destroyed this way, you gain life equal to its toughness. Alright, I'll say it. Only time will tell which is the best Gearhulk. But personally, Noxious Gearhulk is my favorite. Killing a creature, gaining life, and putting a substantial body on the battlefield at the same time is something I really want to do. I already liked playing the occasional Gilt Leaf Winnower, and at only 1 more mana, Noxious Gearhulk is just better in every way. Still, one must always be wary of Archangel Avacyn preventing both the kill and the life gain. You only get the life gain if the creature actually dies. But, as she is also a mythic, then that's probably much less relevant in Duels than in paper. Oval Chase Daredevil is 1 black and 3 generic for a 4/2 human pilot. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Oval Chase Daredevil from your graveyard to your hand. Well now, this could be interesting if there is a deck that would like to discard the Daredevil for value and continuously recur it. I'm not sure such a thing actually exists, though cards like Crypt Breaker certainly wouldn't mind. Still, it seems like a long shot that may actually become relevant. I don't think you actually want to be casting this card though. Prachanda Club Security is a black and 3 generic mana for a 3/4 Aetherborn Warrior. 4 mana for a 3/4 with no abilities. No thanks. Not just not good enough, also boring. Rush of Vitality is a black and 1 generic mana instant that gives target creature +1/+0 and it gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. Since Unnatural Endurance didn't make it into Duels in Oath of the Gatewatch, this gives you a similar effect at a worse mana cost. That said, I don't think Unnatural Endurance would be particularly playable, and I feel that this is strictly worse. Subtle Strike. For a black and 1 generic, we get an instant that lets you choose one or both. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, and or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. This card does 2 things, but it does them both badly. Black is great at dealing with creatures, and with the variety of removal spells that are already available, I think Subtle Strike is way too far down the list to ever make the cut into a deck. Syndicate Trafficker is a black and 1 generic for a 3/1 Aetherborn Rogue. We can also choose to pay a generic mana and sacrifice an artifact, which puts a +1/+1 counter on Syndicate Trafficker, and it gains indestructible until end of turn. Another aggressive 2-drop that wants you to be playing artifacts. This seems like a legit deck in the making, doesn't it? Thriving Rats is a black and a colorless for a 1/2 rat. When it enters the battlefield, we get 2 energy counters, and whenever Thriving Rats attacks, you may pay 2 energy counters. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So I would like this guy to be a 2/1 instead of a 1/2, but even if it were a 2/1, I'm not sure it would be good enough to see play. Tidy Conclusion is a 2 black and 3 generic mana instant that destroys a target creature, and then you gain 1 life for each artifact you control. Alright, at 4 mana in black, we have a board wipe. At 5 mana, I expect more than what Tidy Conclusion gives us. The black artifact deck seems like it's going to be very aggressive, so this certainly doesn't go there. As with Subtle Strike, one thing black is not poor in is removal, and this piece just doesn't make the grade. Underhanded Designs is a black and 1 colorless for an enchantment. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. We can also pay a black and a generic and sacrifice Underhanded Designs to destroy target creature. Activate this ability only if you control 2 or more artifacts. Well, this is kind of like a slightly slower, more expensive Sinister concoction, but without the need to pay the additional costs of discarding a card in 1 life and milling a card and so on. If the black artifact deck is decent, this might go in it in some number. I do think that it is pretty far down the list of removal that deck wants to play though, and it's very doubtful that an aggressive deck will often have the mana free to pay for the drain trigger. Weaponcraft Enthusiast is 1 black and 2 generic for a 0/1 Aetherborn Artificer with Fabricate 2. Alright, this guy's okay. If we need to fill out the 3-drop slot and nothing better is available, then this guy gets the nod. I feel like there are probably better options available, though maybe not. And that is the end of the black cards Kaladesh is bringing us. So let's call out what I feel are the top 5. Number 5 is Midnight Oil. More because I find the card super interesting than that I feel it's guaranteed to be very powerful, though it may end up being that as well. Number 4 is Fretwork Colony. I love the idea that a suicide black deck may become a thing, and if it does, then Fretwork Colony certainly has a home there. Probably Midnight Oil as well. Number 3, Umbral Bruiser. This guy is super aggressive. In fact, it may end up that the black artifact deck and the speculative suicide black deck are actually just the same deck. Black-red aggro may also be a thing. The synergy certainly seems to be there. Number 2, Essence Extraction. This removal spell is kind of a control deck's dream. Similar to Lightning Helix, even if it can't target players, the life gain is really big value. And number 1, say it with me, Noxious Gearhulk. At 4 mana, Necrotal killed a non-black creature and was a measly 2/1 first strike and gained you no life. Not only does the Gearhulk gain you life and have a body more than twice the size, he doesn't care about the creature's color. He's an equal opportunity destroyer. And that will do it for this installment. Join me next time when we go through the red cards of Kaladesh. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please leave a like below. It helps out tremendously. And subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. I have been Tevaron, and until next time, friends, be excellent to each other.